Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. It may interest you to know. I'm joined today by a best-selling author and musician, Brendan Slocumb. Welcome, Brendan.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. I want to get into your two novels. I've read them both, and I love them both. I'm really excited to get to talk to you. But I want to talk a little bit about your background first, because I think you come at writing from the very unique perspective of having this really successful career, illustrious career going in something else, right? In music. I mean, playing for symphonies. Matter of fact, I believe you're a consultant for the Kennedy Center. So you've really risen to the top in that field. And suddenly you're having this monstrously successful second career to run parallel to it. So talk to me about the beginnings of music for you in your life.
Again, thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to speak with you today, Toni. I started my musical journey when I was 9 years old through a public school music program. I started playing violin. And I only did it because we got out of class twice a week. And that was oh yeah, absolutely. I'm in 100%. Let's do it. But my teacher saw that I was pretty good and I was enjoying it. I loved it. It was fun. And she began to push me and I excelled. And through junior high and high school, and it took me to college. It gave me opportunities that I would never have had otherwise. So I am a staunch advocate for public school music programs because I am living proof that they do work.
Sure. And you play my favorite instrument, the violin.
Oh, I try to play it.
So there comes a point in time, I guess, where you must realize, I've made a success of this. When is that moment for you? I mean, because I get that you're doing it through your youth, and it could be sort of becomes your passion, right? But there has to become a point in time when you're like, yeah, I got this. I did it.
I think for me, that was really when auditioning for symphonies and playing solos and everything, when people would come up to me and say, "You were great." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" I just played and it was fun. And even in the classroom when I'm teaching my students, really that moment sparked for me when the day before, they couldn't play something, or the week before, and then they just get it. They put the work in and they get it. It's the best feeling in the world. And I'm like, wow, I feel like I've arrived.
Yeah, that is nice, right? I mean, I guess it is. I didn't really give that any thought before you said it, but I guess there's the magic to the moment when you realize you do it well, but then to give that gift to somebody else probably is just as equally fulfilling.
It really is. And I'm glad you used the word gift, because I truly believe that it is a gift, not only to be able to play and to perform, but to be able to appreciate it. And a lot of my students, my former students, they are not professional musicians, but they hear pieces that we've played when they were in high school, and they say to their kids, "Oh, I played that when I was in high school." And the kids don't believe them. They're like, "There's no way you could play that." "No, I'm telling you, this is what we did in high school, and I know this, and I know this composer, and this is gonna and that's a good feeling as well. And it truly is a gift.
Now, tell me about your work with the Kennedy Center. Of course, very prestigious.
Yeah, it was. I actually had a friend who worked there who was, he needed someone who knew music, who was in education. And he said, "Brendan, I was like, all right, sure. What project do you need me to work on?" And he gave me, I can't really say what the project was or is, if it's still going, I can't say, but he said, "I need you to take this material home, analyze it, tell me if this is going to work for a certain group of people, tell me why." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." So I used my experience in the classroom and with my musical experience. And again, I can't say what the project was, but it was not very good. So I said, "I would not recommend this at all. This is not going to work for what you have in mind. Let's try something else." So it was a wonderful opportunity to use my experience in music and in education to be able to help other people through the generosity of the Kennedy Center. It's a wonderful privilege.
Yeah, agreed. So there comes a point in time, I guess, when you think I can do something else. I can throw one more ball in the air.
Yeah, because I got
Sure, I
plenty
got
of time, tons of time to do that stuff. Yeah.
this. Right. Now, did you get an idea? I guess I'm really fascinated by the creative process, right? So did the idea like bounce around in your brain for a little bit to tell this story? Like you have this story in your head, or did you actively sit down and say, I want to write a novel?
Well, it was a little bit of both. For the Violin Conspiracy, well, backing up a bit, I have written things before, short stories, and I'm a songwriter for the band that I'm in. And even in high school, I would write, and I had the privilege of having the same English teacher for both 11th and 12th grade. So she definitely nurtured. And I would write in college, and I can say this now because the statute of limitations is up, but my friends would ask me to write, some of their papers and everything. And I reluctantly wrote some of them, and they all would get fantastic grades on them. And I'm like, all right, okay, I may have something here. But it was really because of COVID-19. As a working musician, everything stopped. Everything. I was in the middle of a wedding reception when we got the call that the next 3 weddings were completely canceled. And for a working musician, that's how I paid my bills. I no lessons, no recitals, no rehearsals, no concerts, everything totally stopped. So I had plenty of time to focus on writing. And this story, from the day I picked up my violin, I will never forget that I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 45 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. The day I picked up the violin is when this conglomeration of stories started. And I had always said, this is going to make a really good story one day, and I'm going to write it down. And were it not for COVID-19, I probably would have gotten around to writing it maybe in 2023. But it was always in the back of my head that I wanted to do.
That's amazing. Now, how do you create? Is this something where, and I've said it before, I've had other authors on who can only create behind the screen, right? They have to they absorb the characters in their head. They sit down and their fingers just go, like they just become, they see and hear the people telling them what to do almost. Right. And then there's other people who say, no, I need an outline. I need to know in advance. I pre-plan everything. So I know when I'm writing, I'm just following the breadcrumbs I laid out for myself already. How does that work for you?
Again, it's a combination of both. The first couple of things that I tried to write, I just, by the seat of my pants, I just sat down and wrote. And as a result, it's terrible. Some people could do that. I am not one of those people. Can't do it. And the characters for me are really what drive the story. Like in the Violin Conspiracy, the protagonist Ray, he has a story to tell. And if you've got an interesting story, it's really easy to write everything else. The story pretty much writes itself. But I definitely outline. I've got to have everything. It's like, I think it's my musical training. I look at everything in terms of music. You have an overture, you have a middle section, and you have a finale. And, I want to be entertained throughout the entire piece. And that's how I try to write.
So it's all about preparation for you,
Oh,
really.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Years and years and years of sitting down, practicing for hours and hours and hours has totally prepared me for, this is what you have to do in order to be successful. It's second nature to me at this point.
Well, you absolutely have the key, because no matter how you're creating, you have the key, because I've read both novels. The first novel is, it's an absolute thrill ride. As you say, he has a story to tell. You're engaged in his tale right from the get-go. And then along the way, you think you're figuring it out, which is what I like best about your first novel, right? I feel like I'm figuring it out, like as I go, and you just sucker punched me, right? Like, so I'm not figuring it out. Like
Sorry about that.
right? You're like, no, I know, I'm ahead of you, like, but I wasn't, right? So I think that makes it sort of interesting. And for me, one of the true litmus test for a book is I can't put it down, right? I
Mm.
find it irresistible. And those are the authors I really chase, right? And so I chased you because of that, because I found your book. That was the first thing I'd ever read or even known of you, The Violin Conspiracy. And I read it and I found it absolutely irresistible, right? I couldn't put it down.
Oh,
I had to just keep going. I had to find out, how does it end? How does it end? So you really have the key. That's an absolute thrill ride. So I don't know. When I went into the second novel, I didn't know what to expect exactly, because it's this kind of this niche you've created, right? These stories surrounding music,
hmm
right? Who would
I
even think?
I had no intention of doing this, but being so new to this field, I listen and I absorb every bit of feedback that I get. You use what you can use and you discard the rest. But someone actually said the genre you've created is musical thrillers. And I'm like, all right, sure, I will take it. I will absolutely do that. And I was given some fantastic advice to write what you know. And I know music, so it makes perfect sense to me to have everything music centered. And I'm happy that you said what you said about Symphony of Secrets, my second novel. I didn't know what to expect either. And when I wrote it, I totally felt like a failure because I heard from seasoned authors, they all said the same thing. That second book is the hardest one to write, and it's what it is. It's a second book. So I really thought that I had failed. The expectations from the Violin Conspiracy, I just didn't know. So I put it away, and 6 months later, right before it was time to turn it in for edits, I read it again. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Believe it or not, I like it slightly more than the Violin Conspiracy. It's a totally different story, and I think it really holds true to the genre that I'm trying to work within, the musical thrillers. And I'm working on my third book now, and it involves a cellist and witness protection. So I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, and you really have created this niche that I find fascinating. I have no talent whatsoever myself, right?
I
I
don't
mean,
believe that at all.
no, even humming a tune, like I get thrown off a little bit, so I have no ability. I'm great, I'm great at what I do, I'm great in a courtroom, but this is not my thing at all. I like to write though too. I like to create, but music isn't my thing, but I'm in awe of people who can create it, right? Because everyone remembers truly moments in their life frozen to music, right? You can always you can play a few bars of anything and remember, I remember the pain, I remember the joy, I remember the relief,
Oh yeah.
right, that swept over me. And that anything that could connect you so tightly to moments in time, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to give back to the world. So I'm in awe of people who can create music. And I think like you've taken people with that ability, right, with that ability to create and to do this, and you've matched them with these really interesting stories. I mean, you don't lose anything in these stories. These are some of the best I've read.
Oh wow.
Uh,
I'm
you know,
glad
for,
I'm sitting down for that one. Wow.
right. Well, yeah, I mean, for that, you're writing mystery thrillers. And the second one, what I liked about it is you sort of weaved a little history in there on us,
Mhm.
right? More than the first one. So, because while the first one certainly brings us to his life, you know what I mean? Your protagonist's life or his family's life. I mean, certainly there's that in the first one, but in the second one, it's more of you're taking us through, I felt like a period of time, because you have to understand what the world was like to understand how this is happening in your second novel.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun to do. I love history, and I think history is so important. Especially nowadays, we've got to understand what was going on then so that we don't repeat it. And I'm a firm believer in acknowledgement. If you acknowledge what happened, what's going on, that's the best way to begin to heal.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think that's what I didn't know what to expect going into the second novel. And you kind of seamlessly weave this historical, like taking us to a prior time to try to help us understand how it's even possible that he could be investigating, like, well, how could this have even happened?
Hmm.
Right? At first blush, you think, well, no, right? Right. But if you understand the time period of the world and what was going on around, suddenly it seems like that could be possible.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And I think you took us through the story in that way, like through helping us understand a different time. And, I just still thought you weave them together seamlessly. I like that a lot. I'm a little bit of a history buff too. So
Awesome.
I have to admit, when you took history and music and thriller, and you put it together. And I also like that you're not gory for anybody listening. I mean, he's not like a gory writer, right? Because I don't get behind that either. I've tried to read thrillers that are a little too much for me, and maybe I'm
Mhm.
too old, I don't know, but
You
but
know,
once
you're not the first person that said that. People, when they've read my stuff, they're like, and no, well, I'm not getting, well, and there's no blood and guts, and
yeah.
like, okay, yeah, all right. Yeah, is that a prerequisite for, having a good thriller or a good mystery? And a lot of mysteries that I've read, there's always someone getting mutilated someplace, and it's like, I think we can do it without the bloodshed.
And it's one of the things I really do love about what you're doing, because I'm not really down for gore. I
Mhm.
can't watch a scary movie. And if I come across it in a book, even if I'm interested enough to try to get to the end, I honestly find myself flipping through really fast, like not to have to read it.
Mhm.
And I prefer using my mind. That old Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes, more sort of trying to use my mind to like to figure it out.
So,
Prefer a clever read.
yeah, those are
Uh,
my role models. I love both of those. I love the Sherlock Holmes stories, and Agatha Christie is one of my absolute favorite writers.
oh, my favorite, probably my favorite writer of all time. So I'm with you there. I think I've read all of her mysteries.
Hmm.
So and maybe that's why I'm so drawn to your material, right? Maybe because maybe now finding out that you sort of model a little bit after that, because it's clever. It's really clever how she writes, and I prefer clever.
Mhm.
And that's what I think you've really captured in both your novels. They tie in music. They're both different, but they're clever. And
Thank
so
you.
I compliment you. You did a beautiful job on both books. I recommend them highly.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Now, where are you the minute you hit the bestseller list, right? The agent call you or what? I mean, how does that work?
Um, I used to ask early on, how's the book doing? How are we? Are we where we should be? And my agent just straight up told me, he was like, don't ask. If they don't say, if your publishers don't say anything to you, you're doing great. Okay, fine. I didn't ask. And a year after the Violin Conspiracy came out, my agent gave me the numbers, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, that number is much higher than I ever would have thought, and I'm in awe. I truly am in awe that people have enjoyed reading this book, and it's just, I mean, the smile on my face should tell the entire story. I'm very, very grateful.
Well, I would be really surprised. I got to be honest with you, and I'm not pushing for information. I'm not, but I'd be very surprised if you didn't get optioned, to make a movie out of it. Because it's, I mean, it's really good. It's really good. So out of both, I mean, they're very good stories, and I think you'll just draw an enormous audience from people who like all different things. I mean, you know, you don't have to just like one thing. There's no multiple things that can draw you to your stories. You're a very good storyteller.
Thank you.
So there isn't a moment when you realize you're on the bestseller list. There isn't a moment like you get a phone call and you're like Tom Cruise sliding across the floor in your underwear dancing or anything like that.
It's every single day. If I get a message on Instagram or on Facebook or an email where someone says, I love the story, that to me, that's it. That's what really, gives me the energy, and I smile, and I'm so happy that someone likes it. Bestseller or not, it doesn't even make a difference to me. Just the fact that people are enjoying the story, that's really what, I'm getting a ton of kicks off of that. That makes me happy. It's not even about making a list or winning a competition or anything. I don't even care. I'm just happy that people enjoy the story.
Sure, to be reaching so many people with it.
Mhm.
Tell me about your students. Are you still teaching?
I am. I'm actually I'm teaching 3 lessons this afternoon, and it's really challenging. I just had to give up 2 students because I'm away so much with the traveling and the book promotion and the writing and interviews and everything. So consistency is really, really tough to come by.
Mhm.
But the ones who are really sticking with me, I haven't seen these students for about a month and a half. So they're either going to be extremely prepared today for their lessons, or we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. But I think they're going to be ready today.
Do you feel like equally as fulfilled when you're sitting down writing a book as you do when you nail a piece with your violin?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm going to take, okay, I will say this. I am a musician first. I am a violinist first, a teacher, before a writer. I'm a teacher and a musician who happen to write a couple of books that people like. That's how I look at it. My
That's
first
interesting.
love is playing, and I wouldn't be in this interview right now were it not for my instrument. So that's always going to be my first love.
Wow, that's interesting. Um, do you remember the first time you wrote your own piece of music?
Oh, like it was yesterday. And it was actually a song that I'd written for the band, and I was terrified, I was thrilled, I was excited, I was, it was a scary thing because I learned to be vulnerable. I'm putting myself out
Mm.
there. These are my words, this is my music, my rhythms, and I did it initially for myself, but I'm hoping that other people will actually get enjoyment from it. And if they do, awesome. And if they don't, I got to do something different. I have to make it better. And so it was thrilling. And people liked it. I am happy to say people actually like that. They still talk about that song. What about that song? I'm really happy about some of the stuff that I've written. I remember that first song like it was yesterday.
What kind of music do you perform?
I am on violin. I'm strictly classical. I will delve into bluegrass every now and then. I love bluegrass music. One, because it's extremely challenging to play. Classical stuff, that's what I was trained in, and I love the classical repertoire. And for everything else, I play keyboards, and I'm the singer and songwriter in my alternative rock band.
Wow. So I didn't even realize you do a lot. You have a lot of, you're juggling there a lot.
A lot. I'm dropping a lot of things, but I'm trying.
I mean, violin, I assume based upon how you expressed yourself earlier, is your favorite, but am I wrong?
No, not at all. I love it. That's my baby. That's what got me to where I am. And if I didn't love it, I would not do it. I learned early on that if you're going to do something, do it to the absolute best of your ability. Don't halfway do something. It's a waste of time. And I love it so much. I'm willing to put in the work. I put in the hard work. I put in the hours of practice. I put in the research time. And it's definitely worth it. I love it. I'm here right now because of it.
Now I have to know this. It's an odd
Oh.
question, but I have to know. Do you have a story behind your first violin?
Well, I have had several instruments over the years. My very first violin, and I'm not going to recommend this. People are going to hear this. Any violinists are going to hear this, and they're going to be like, "Wow, Brendan, what were you thinking?" My dad actually got my first violin. It was, I think, it was a Nilling violin, in a hard black plastic case, and it was in October in North Carolina, so it was pretty cold. And the night before the first class, he showed it to me, and it was in the trunk of his car. And anyone who plays an instrument knows that the trunk of the car is not the place for a wooden instrument. I just didn't know, and just holding it and seeing it and smelling it, and it was just had that new instrument smell, and it was just you smell like varnish, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful instrument, and over the years, I've gotten better instruments. In my senior year of high school, I had a professional level violin. It was a 1953 Eugene Lehman, violin. And I was going to, it was the first one that I owned outright. It was a professional instrument, and it sounded great, and I sounded great on it, and it was going to take me to college and take me on my professional career. That was the way to go. And it was stolen right before I graduated from high school, and I was devastated. So in the Violin Conspiracy, the theft is based on that violin. And if anyone's playing on a 1953 Eugene Lehman violin, I won't say anything. You could happily return it to me, and we'll call it even. I won't say anything, I promise.
So you really were able to capture the emotions of that so
Oh, yeah.
well because you had experienced it.
Definitely real. And, I don't really think that I encapsulated how much of a struggle that was, just to walk into that room every day and know that my instrument wasn't there. I never wish that feeling on anyone. But yeah, it was everything that you read in the story. It was real, 100% real.
Had you restored that violin? Had you done, because you really capture with a lot of detail in the Violin Conspiracy the process of getting a violin that needed restoration, and I think taking it through to that point that you made it. You ultimately make it what it becomes and what it is for you your protagonist in the story. Was there a time that you did do that in real life, that you took a violin that was in bad condition and restored it?
I did not. Nothing that was in as bad a shape as Ray's violin. I've had older instruments, they needed some work, of course, but nothing to that extent. There are general repairs that need to be made, but nothing to that extent. I don't know that I would have the time or energy to restore something, but I could be missing out. Who knows? I'm happy with the instruments that I have. Someone else restored them for me, and I'm very happy about that.
So ultimately, that high school violin is the violin you sort of long for, and that's what yeah, because it came through in the book. I mean, you could have captured it anyway, just fictionalizing it, but you drew the reader into the emotion of that moment, I thought, really well.
Thank you. It was
So I
real.
wondered. So I wondered, like, if you had any similar experiences, but it's for anybody, I think, who's been in your shoes, when you get attached to, I think, almost anything, and it doesn't have to be music. It could be anything. It could be some keychain that your mother gave you, when you're young and you're just attached to having it with you, or
Yeah.
I mean, I think your attachment to something, but especially something that you love and makes you feel a certain way. And I think your violin helped you feel a certain way. I think every child who first, falls in love with music, right, and starts to get good at playing music, and it becomes their passion. I think that they get that attachment to having their instrument with them.
Yeah, it's like an extension of your body. It really is. And it truly feels like, I'll never forget the day that I discovered that it was gone. It was like a piece of me just was ripped away. And that hole has gotten smaller, but it's still there. It's just, I'll never see that instrument again. Well, I might, but chances are I won't ever see it again. And I'm always going to have a spot, for that instrument, because it was supposed to do so much for me, and it was mine. It was mine. I worked for it, and it was mine, and someone else has it now. And, okay, I got to get it together. Okay, I'm good.
Right. Well, you know what? Indirectly, that person did you a favor, right? Because maybe he planted a seed that later becomes this,
That
this
is a good way to
wonderful
look at it.
story.
I'm going to start looking at it that way. Yeah, that's good. I'll do that.
Right. Right. He plants the seed that becomes this monstrously successful story and sets you down a path of yet an additional career to be good at.
I should be thanking that guy.
Right. To a certain extent, right? I mean, I think we live by our experiences in life. I know I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago, for sure. And I think with each event or each experience that you have, right, it molds you a little bit, and sometimes it gives you ideas. I love the process of collaborative creativity. Right. And I always talk about this, where you have a screenplay, for example, and that, you know, you had the writer who created the paper version of that character, but then you have an actor who comes along and like breathes life into paper person,
Totally.
right?
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
gives them new and nuances and quirks maybe that become part of, you know, making that person alive off the paper. And then you have your visual storyteller, right? Your storyteller, your cinematographer, your director, who kind of visually weaves you through the tale. So, and I think at the end, when you see the movie or the TV show, whatever, it's such a collaborative thing to create, sometimes a masterpiece, let's face
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Whereas writing a novel is somewhat isolated, right? You are on your own in the early stages, certainly. While you may have an editor or somebody, you're not getting the opportunity to bounce ideas off of someone is in a group, and there isn't somebody else who's going to pick up the baton, unless of course you get optioned and it turns into a movie. but right now, when you're creating this hardcover book that's going out into the world, you are an island to a certain extent. And you know, that's not as easy, I think, to create like that, to create in a place where you're doing it on your, of course, there's nobody to criticize you and change what you think, so maybe that has its own merit.
I agree with that. You know, with the one of the interesting things about the writing process for me is I actually found that I was looking for critique and criticism. As a musician, you know, I'm in a lesson and my teacher will tell me, Brendan, you need to do this differently. You need more of this, less of this. I'm totally accustomed to hearing that. And same thing with the writing, you know, I would let people read this for me. Tell me what you think. Is this boring? Is this entertaining? Do you want more or less of this? What would you like to see, you know, as a reader? And I've run into a lot of writers and people who are trying to get published. And I ask what they're writing and they tell me, I say, oh, I'd love to read it. Oh, well, I have to wait until it's good. And I'm like, well, okay, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. This is how you make it better. A lot of people are actually afraid of criticism and critique, whereas I welcome it. I think we need it in order to get better. It's how we learn to get better. And you know, I guess I'm an odd duck in that way. I totally want the critique. I want the criticism. I want people's thoughts on what it is that I'm writing, because I want them to be entertained.
So there comes a point in time then when you write your novel that you do let other people give you some feedback, right? You should put it out in the world and let, you know, a friend or a family member, whoever, you know, take a look, tell me what you're thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I mentioned when I write initially, you know, I'm writing a story, but it's not for me. I'm not going to keep it to myself. I want people to read it because I want them to be entertained. These are stories I like to think that really do need to be told. And if you're going to tell a story, it's got to be entertaining and interesting. And the only way you're going to find out if it's entertaining and interesting to your audience is to get that feedback, to let them read it. And you know, I've scrapped so many chapters because, you know, people have read it and yeah, this is trash. This is boring. I don't like this. And then I'll go back and reread. Yeah, you know what? I agree because of X, Y, and Z. And then I make the changes. And you know, I'm a full collaboration writer when it comes to having people read my stuff all the time.
Before it's ended, before you've gotten to the end, do you let it out, or is it after you've gotten a first full draft?
Oh, I do maybe 5 chapters at a time. I'll let someone read it. Here, read this, and you know, is this boring? Does it need to, you know, is the pacing good? Are you, you know, are you, how do you feel when you read this? Is it entertaining to you? That's the big question that I always ask people. Is it entertaining? Do you want more? You know, sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no, this is terrible.
You know what would be really interesting, for me, I think, is that if I got 5 chapters in, and this is my issue, I realize that I'd just be dogging you for what happens next.
That's a
Right?
good thing. That's a great thing, actually.
Right. I'm not very good at like stopping in the middle of a story.
That's how
Right.
you know when you've hooked someone, if they really want more. What's next? What's next?
Right. Now, for you, in your mind, you sort of know, like, you know who the bad guy is going to be before you start writing, even, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Do you ever change it, ever deviate? Like
Oh
ever
my gosh.
start?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, for
Yeah.
Violin Conspiracy, I think I had 5 different endings, you know, five. And then the one that I decided on ultimately, I figured it would have the most impact. But yeah, there were several endings and several bad guys. And yeah, I changed around a lot.
And well, in all of your books, I thought you created a very interesting panel of, I call them supporting cast.
Mhm.
Right? In a TV show, they'd be the supporting actors. Right? I thought that you created great supporting cast, supporting characters who came into the story and, one way or another made it just made it a little bit more interesting.
Mhm.
Right, because you always have sort of the sane person, right, going through your story. Like your protagonist is usually pretty normal, at least in the two stories I've read, right, and going through, and then just uh, coming across a lot of people who are just quirky or odd or interesting or different or mean or whatever the case may be, but just weaving through dealing with these other people. And I
Mhm.
thought that was nice, a very nice touch. I like that in a book. I like great supporting characters, even though they have a small role.
Mhm.
I'd argue that there are some people who've created stories for me that are multi-part. I don't know how else to say it. Like they they carry the same characters through maybe, in 5, 4, 3, whatever novels, telling more stories with that person,
Mhm.
as the person going through. And I look forward to, even if someone's going to pop in for one chapter and you're like, oh, Jamie's back. Like, I look forward to that. So I really do kind of like that as part of the process for me, as part of what makes me enjoy a book. And I thought you did a really nice job with that.
Thank you. I'm a firm believer, and I learned this from a drama teacher when I was teaching high school. The drama instructor, I learned from her that there is no such thing as a small character. Every single person has a role. In play production she would do there, everybody had a name. There was every single actor had a name, and they were all important. So I really took from that. I'm like, okay, what's the point of putting a character in a book if they're not going to have some impact? And so I try to get, even if it's a small impact, they will have some sort of impact to the story.
Yeah, move the ball forward. I agree.
Absolutely.
Your characters did. Everybody sort of moved the ball forward in one way or another. So tell me about your students. Do they know? I mean, do most of them familiar? Like now, they're like you're like a big shot now, and they're all.
It's the funniest thing. The younger kids, the first thing that are you famous now? And I'm like, no, I'm still that same guy. And I've been teaching these kids for 5, 6 years now, and I see them every week, and it's no big deal. And then when the book comes out, all of a sudden pictures and Instagram and autographs. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm going to see you next week. No, you still are responsible for having this piece learned next week. I don't want to hear it. No, there's nothing famous going on here. This is just a lesson. So it's funny. It's flattering and it's funny.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, right? Because suddenly the person who's teaching you, you're seeing for your lessons every week, or who is your teacher, and then suddenly you're reading about them, in all these different, publications, or on social media certainly as well. And I know you go into the bookstore and see the setup at Barnes and Noble, right? And I'm thinking, like, you're like, wait, that name's awfully familiar.
I
Like,
think I know that guy. I think he yelled at me for missing an F sharp yesterday. Yeah, is that him?
right? You're like, is that you? Like, I would think you're getting to a certain point where I mean, now do they treat you with a sense of awe, or it's just like, wait, I'm not going to treat you any differently? Like this, are you
Well,
getting more?
in the beginning, absolutely. Like a year ago, it was, the parents more so than the kids. The kids are, they get what their parents give to them. And it's, in the beginning, it was pictures and autographs and everything. And the parents are a little bit in awe. The kids are just kind of like, oh, maybe I need to practice this a little bit more. I don't want to I don't want to have a bad lesson, but it's very, very flattering. And, I'm just happy that they see me as their teacher. I just want to be their teacher, and I want to see them succeed in their lessons. That's all I'm looking for.
I think it's such a privilege to meet you, honestly, because I feel like there ought to be more people in the world, because you're like, just like you. I mean, you're a great role model.
Oh,
Right, to put yourself out there to say, look, you know, I started off with a small passion for music, and you know, I fed that passion and I stuck with something, and sticking with something and not giving up through, let's face it, everybody gets kicked around, right?
oh
I'm
yeah.
sure we didn't get into it, but I'm sure your journey wasn't all, you know, bells and banjos and flowers, you know, covering your path, right? There are days that I'm sure you just felt like, why am I doing this? I want to run away screaming where nobody knows me, right? Everybody has days like that.
And you'll read about those days when I write my memoir. You will definitely be like, wow. I have a friend in Australia. I play an online game, and one of my friends, after he read the book, he was just like, Brendan, how are you this nice a guy after going through everything that you've been through that I'm reading about? And I'm like, dude, you know, it's I have a choice. Everything is a choice. I can be bitter my entire life, or I could make lemonade out of lemons. And I choose to make lemonade. You know, I choose to be happy. I choose to be optimistic about things. And, you know, that's what I want. I think we're put here to be happy. I don't think we're supposed to be miserable. And a lot of times it's a choice. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but, you know, I look at it as a choice, and I choose to be happy and to be optimistic and to spread, you know, optimism for everyone. If I can do it, anyone can do it. I am living proof of that.
Well, I love that. I really do. And I think that's a great role model for children, because you're in a position to influence
Mhm.
children, especially children with talent. You know, this is, and I don't want this to come off the wrong way at all, but a lot of times kids who have that level of talent or passion, they tend to be shy, right?
Mm.
Painfully shy, to the point where they don't maybe seek out friendships as much. You know, they tend to focus more on their craft, and they don't even know how to begin, like forming a social network. Maybe that comes a little easier as you get older. So I think that to see somebody who did that, who started off with maybe that same passion and made such success out of it, and encourages them to help create and show how worthy creating music can be, and how sticking with it can be, and how it's never too late to go into a bunch of different interests. That this generation needs that,
Mhm.
right? It needs to see role models who are into creating, and creating in all different ways.
I agree.
Say create music, create books, you know, who knows what you'll be doing next. Next time I'll have you back on the podcast, you'll be, you know, you'll be painting or sculpting or something. We'll be talking about that.
You're tossing some good ideas out. I might have to act on some of those with all the free time that I
Yeah. But I just think, like, to be able to chase, you know, a dream, to be able to create in all different ways, it says a lot. You know, admire creative people, and I think putting yourself out there like that as a role model, trying to influence kids, you know, to find their passion and to
yeah.
practice and stick with it. I would think you get a lot of kids who don't want to stick with it, and
Oh
to say,
yeah.
look what happens when you stick with it.
It's, you know, and I tell the parents, when the parents are considering, you know, allowing their kids to quit, it's like, I have never met a child who has grown up and said to their parents, thank you so much for letting me quit piano lessons. Thank you for allowing me to drop the violin. I'm so much better off because of it. Never, ever, ever happens. And, you know, I want it to be fun, but at the same time, I want them to learn those lessons, you know, just stick with it. If you say you're going to do something, do it, and work hard. If it's worth having, it's worth working for. And, you know, that lesson is really lost nowadays, especially with, you know, just everything that's going on with kids. I want them to be able to get that lesson and live the rest of their lives utilizing those lessons. And you know, like I said, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I'm living proof that it does work. If you work hard, it works.
Well, agreed. I agree. Anything you work hard at eventually happens for you. If you stick with it, it happens.
Yeah.
And you'll never know how close you are to achieving your goals until, you know,
Yeah.
until you give up, right? You'll never realize you could have been like a touch away.
Mhm.
So I'm in agreement. Now you're still working on a third novel.
I am. I'm working on my next book right now, and I'm writing every day. And my goal is to be done by August so that I can go on a much needed vacation.
You gonna throw me any spoilers?
I
Or you
would
gonna
just
make
say
me wait?
it's music centered again, a cellist and witness protection, and no blood, no gore. I'll say that, but it's a good book.
Gonna be
It's
a
a good
fun
book.
ride.
It's definitely gonna be a fun ride. Definitely.
Well, I hope you'll come back. When the new book comes out, I'd like to, if I get a chance to read it, I hope you come back and talk to me about it.
If this is an official invitation, I am accepting.
Thank you. It is an official invitation. I'm
Done.
anxiously awaiting your third book, and I'll gobble it up right away, and you come back and talk to me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Again, it was really a privilege to get to meet you. You're so eloquent, and just such I think, an example to kids. And I love people who try to make a difference for kids, and I think that's great.
Thank you. I thank you so much. I had those people in my life who believed in me and wanted me to do well, and I am just returning the favor. I'm paying it forward.
Everybody needs a good mentor, right?
Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Anybody who hasn't read his book, I'll put the link to his website. Really, that's probably the best place to get information. I think you have the links to all the different places you
Yeah,
can buy
all of my
books.
social media, bookstores, everything.
Yeah. So I'm going to put his website link. If you haven't read one of his books, please just run out. Don't even finish the end. Just go out and go and get one of the books. He's well worth it. You're going to enjoy it. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And on that, I'm going to close the podcast out.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.